Welcome to Whisperer of Madness. If you're enjoying the story, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps grow the channel and this community. Semi-plane calendar of the gods, year 37,671. With 5,000 pirates, Leyland Fallen had taken down Debanks Island, which had a population of more than 2 million people, destroying the Sakart's empire to create his own country. He himself had become a demigod, becoming one of the higher-ups in the world of gods. Many were astonished. This youth was only 26 years of age, and yet he'd achieved something so astounding. They could only look up to him now. Numerous elite devil hunters and native knights surrounded a group of luxurious horse chariots in the new fallen city. The knights' crests and the caravan's flag were symbols of a giant serpent, indicating the might of royalty. The plague's been taken care of, and we're beginning to plow the land for spring. We're doing great. Leyland pulled apart the curtains of the chariot, gazing at the green fields with a hint of satisfaction on his face. Saintess Barbara knelt at his side along with beautiful maids, their eyes full of an unconcealable fervor. The empire would be governed by the blood of its god. This was the decree of Leyland's giant serpent church. To get a more stable foundation, this god himself had brought a few natives around. Almost right after the new country was established, the 20 purest and most beautiful refined girls of Debanks Island had been sent to the palace. It didn't seem like such things would stop any time. Leyland never rejected such matters. Besides, this suited his standards better. He was currently traveling to proclaim his strength to the entire empire. The view of his fleshly body would also draw in more worshippers. Leyland had developed a better understanding of the island's situation through his travels, and at the same time imprinted the might of the empire deeply into the hearts of the natives. This is the most fertile land in the empire, and it's close to the imperial capital. It's understandable for them to have such results, Barbara said, her eyes glinting. It's great that they have knowledge in this area, especially when it comes to these matters. Leyland understood the schemes of his worshippers like the back of his hand. Hearing what Barbara said, he had no idea whether to laugh or cry. However, such things were also a part of the path of faith, and Leyland had to consider his options carefully. Based on the way things are going, we should be able to get past this year's famine well. After patrolling the entire country, Leyland was in a better mood. While the plague had greatly affected societal order, activity was slowly resuming normal levels. Thanks to the accumulations of the Sakart's empire, this new country was headed in a better direction. A lot of things determine the strength of an empire. There's the population, agriculture, economy, military, and faith. Leyland stroked his chin. I have 50,000 soldiers stationed in the capital. With Debanks Island itself only having 900,000 residents, it's definitely the greatest military. On the other hand, my finances are a problem. The agriculture and economy were affected by the plague, and it will take some time to return to normal. Most importantly, there's faith. Leyland had dealt fatal blows to Debanks Island's totem spirits and nature spirits. All those unwilling to serve were wiped out along with their tribes. With the golden scorpion at their head, the rest became subordinate to Leyland. That took up a portion of the faith in the empire. Leyland was more than happy for this to happen. After all, his church was still the majority with more than 80% of the faith. The nature spirits could only divide the remaining fifth amongst themselves. On top of that, he was a demigod now. His priests had divine spells, something that the shamans of the native gods could not compare to. He had a huge leg up over the competition, and was obviously unafraid of competing with them. These gods would likely be forced to hang around near him with no other choice. Then there's governance. I've already rewarded the pirates greatly, with land, slaves, and noble status. However, they are still fewer in number than the original native chiefs and nobles. Leyland shook his head. From his position as a ruler, the population of the natives was terrifying. On the other hand, there were less than 5,000 who'd followed an outsider like him. The difference was like that between a drop of water and a lake. Leyland had no doubt that if he did nothing, basic governance would fall to the natives in less than 30 years. Outsiders could only join in, be it passively or actively. To change this, he had to bring some new people in and kill some others. Only by bringing people from Fallen Island and killing natives could he ensure the stability of his power. Unfortunately, Leyland wasn't just a ruler. His bigger priority was his godhood, and a massacre that dropped the number of natives would only reduce his power of faith. It would not benefit him. While he was conquering them, these natives were his enemies, and it was essential to reduce their numbers. Now, however, they were part of his ascent to godhood. Killing them lost all meaning. A god didn't care if the one governing the empire was a native or an outsider. All that mattered was that he received the same amount of faith. With the support of the church, his descendants wouldn't fall to the level of mere symbols or puppets. That would be enough. "There is no eternal empire, but the gods have long lives," Leyland muttered. Compared to the long life of a god, even the most glorious of empires in history seemed short-lived. Beep. Response to today's prayers completed. Handled a total of 348,761 cases, bestowed 13,286 spells. The AI chip's prompt caused Leyland's lips to curve upwards in a smile. Gods had to take care of their worshippers, prayers, and bestow divine spells every day. While his now divine soul could process fast enough to take care of this himself, it wouldn't be a walk in the park. The effort would drain him. With over 90,000 followers, a following even more enormous than that of some true gods, the amount of work he had to do was vast and complicated. However, the AI chip took over the tedious work, which made things more convenient for Leyland. Even for a true god, such difficult work took more than just their bodies and avatars. Some even designated subordinate deities to the task. The AI chip performed these tasks better than most gods, and on top of that, Leyland could trust it absolutely without fear of betrayal. "Your Highness!" Heading all the way back to their emperor, the numerous youthful and beautiful maids greeted Leyland immediately. Most of them exposed their bare arms and lower abdomens, showing their smooth skin with a heated gaze. Leave alone the girls the tribes had offered, even the maids in Leyland's palace were rather good. Some could even be the heads of noble families. Leyland didn't mind a cordial conversation with them on the average day, but now he had something more important to do. The center of the capital's power had been Akhaben's church. It had been remodeled into a headquarters for the giant church after the war, dedicated to Leyland's worship. Leyland was standing on the location of the old altar, observing a gigantic piece of obsidian on the pedestal. This rock had a metallic luster to it and looked like a black brick. However, Leyland's astute senses found something different with it. If not for Akhaben's statue being destroyed, it would never have shown itself. "I've finally found it. Is this Akhaben's trove?" Leyland placed his hand on the surface of the black brick, immediately linking his divine will to a huge space. Divine force surged in the air, clearly beginning to dissipate already. Numerous translucent souls looking to be sleeping on the surface, with some still withering away. They filled an entire layer of the place. The souls of Akhaben's followers. I never thought I'd be so lucky as to find a semi-plane containing them. While it isn't all that large, it's still much better than most demigod weapons. Guiding the souls of followers was the task of divine souls. Whether pious worshippers turned into petitioners, valiant spirits, or holy souls, they were all of great help to their gods. Naturally, they wouldn't easily be abandoned. Demigods lacked their own divine kingdoms, so many built their own demigod weapons or other items to be containers that could store the souls of their followers. Akhaben was obviously very lucky to have found a semi-plane. There are at least 1 million souls. Having estimated the number of souls within the brick, Leyland was shocked once again by Akhaben's accumulations. A semi-plane was no divine kingdom. No matter how hard one tried to protect them, the worshippers within would still die. Akhaben would only guide the most devout of followers into the plane, which eliminated a large number of natives with more general faith. Akhaben's fall had killed most of the souls, and those left over were actually the best of the best. They were the essence of the millions of native souls over the Empire's centuries of existence. "This is what true gods count on. I am far too weak in comparison." Leyland sighed and observed the semi-plane. These souls evidently only worshipped Akhaben, and they were useless to Leyland unless he destroyed them to take their soul origins. However, that was too wasteful. Instead, his greatest harvest was the semi-plane itself. Emissary of wealth demigods had confirmed their path to ascension. All that they had left to do was make their preparations. They required faith and a divine role, but other things like a divine kingdom were also indispensable. If, by coincidence, one already had a semi-plane, it would take much less effort to build their divine kingdom. To a true god, Their divine kingdom was where their true body lay. No matter how much care was put into creating it, it would not be enough. Leyland already had his own plans for his divine kingdom, but now that he had a semi-plane, he could use it to contain the souls of his worshippers. I can make use of it once I've modified it slightly. It's better to seal all of Akhabin's worshippers' souls here. Leyland had soon determined the uses of the semi-plane. With the standard divine power to alter reality, the semi-plane began to whistle. Golden divine force rippled the air, pushing out Akhabin's brand and alarming a few powerful souls. Who encroaches on the master's country? Golden flames blazed, and tens of native souls ascended into the skies, glaring at Leyland. False god, this is not a place for you. Ooh, valiant spirits. Leyland knew that the souls of these natives should have been heroes of the Sakart's empires past. There could even be a few past emperors amongst them. Akhabin has fallen. It's about time that you, who have been abandoned by the changing eras, enter the trash can of history. In Leyland's eyes, these valiant spirits were zealous worshippers of Akhabin. They were useless to him. As his chant sounded, the snarling spirits suddenly froze as the spiritual force that made up their bodies fell apart, beginning to dissipate. How gutsy are you, to dare go against a god? A tremendous aura exploded forth from Leyland, and the few valiant spirits that had managed to hang on disappeared. Their existences had been supported by Akhabin's divine force. With his fall, they were far weaker than before, so how could they do anything in front of Leyland? After he took care of these last bits of resistance, the rest of the souls all became confused or fell into a deep sleep. They had no power whatsoever to rebel. Something like a hurricane swept through the semi-plane. A large black hole appeared at its heart, and many souls were swept in. At the end, the tail of the hurricane reached Leyland's hands. A huge number of souls were piled up into a golden crystal ball, swimming inside like tadpoles. Akhabin already made this place suitable for the souls of worshippers, however, it's still lacking. Looking at the desolate semi-plane, Leyland frowned. Divine force, change reality. I command, let there be light. It was like magic. The moment he spoke, a dazzling light was formed amidst the chaos, expanding and chasing away all the shadows. I command, let there be water. The dry ground immediately closed up, as streams appeared and formed lakes and seas. With the water must come plant life. Tender green sprouts emerged from the barren soil tenaciously, and the greenness that was full of life spread through the area. Soon, they covered the entire semi-plane and formed large plains and forests. That should be it for the basics. The tremendous amount of divine force required to alter the semi-plane was slightly strenuous for Leyland. With a flick of his sleeves, thousands of milky white souls fell into the plane, turning into bewildered souls. You will stay here for now. Amongst them were natives, pirates, and even a few that looked like devils. After hearing Leyland's voice, they all knelt down respectfully and began to pray. Yes, Master. You are the serpent of the world that devours all, the master of death who guides all souls like us. There is an agreement between a god and his worshippers. As the worshippers give up their faith, I must protect their souls after death. Leyland muttered to himself. This was the responsibility gods took on. Taking care of it, he'd suddenly felt his connection with his worshippers suddenly grow more firm. It's still fine to place the followers' souls here for now, but I still have to become a true god as quickly as possible and build my divine kingdom. That's the only place souls should return to. The use of altars, divine weapons, or even semi-planes to contain souls was something only demigods did, and it was because they had no other options. It was a makeshift strategy that could not protect the souls of followers well. A semi-plane was slightly better than altars or divine weapons when it came to the rate at which souls disappeared. It was usually so fast that demigods' hearts ached. On top of that, the life in the souls would be erased slowly. The gods obviously would not stand seeing their wealth dissipating. However, all methods to contain worshippers, souls had this flaw, except of course for divine kingdoms. However, becoming a true god was still extremely tedious for demigods. Leyland couldn't forget about the middle god helm, whose role was to be the protector. His church prioritized attacks on false gods, and unfortunately he definitely viewed Leyland as such. Thankfully, his main territories were in Banks Island, and there was a proven problem with the natives' faith. He hadn't gathered attention yet. However, with his rise right now, the secret couldn't be kept much longer. No, there already are gods who have noted my existence. Leyland looked towards the harbor, seeing a numerous fleet. The howling sea breeze and terrifying ocean sprays smacked on the gleaming, splendid surfaces of these large warships. At the top of the warship was a large, bright gold coin bending in the winds. This was the gold ship, belonging to gold priest Xena under the goddess of wealth. Leyland had seen it before at Port Venus Harbor, and it was now approaching the seas of DeBanks Island. Priestess, based on the directions of our god, we will reach the continent soon. At the bow of the gold ship, Leyland saw a familiar Bishop Xena. She was dressed in a white deer skin coat, looking lost in thought. I understand. You may leave. Xena waved her arms and sent the captain away, her mind like the great waves on the surface of the ocean. A giant serpent church is rising amongst the native islands. I must know everything about it. This was a divine command Lady Walking had given her. Only a decree from the goddess could get this gold priest to abandon Port Venus, where gold seemed to flow like a river, and instead risk immense danger to enter the native sea regions. Show goodwill, but also observe carefully. Xena thought over the goddess' words, looking slightly hesitant. The goddess' hints that the native empire had something to do with Port Venus thrilled her. Though I do know why, I'm certain that the only one capable of doing this is the legendary young master of the fallen family. Xena had an instinct that was unique to women. There are ships ahead. Be on alert. At this moment, the sailor at the observatory tower yelled at the top of his voice. Enemy ships, the canoes of the natives. Having had several experiences with them, Xena found it hilarious as she gazed at the waters, but then could no longer laugh. Tens of huge warships leaped out through the horizons, under the lead of an even larger pirate ship that was modified with magic as they surrounded them. On the warships were numerous elite soldiers and sailors. When had the natives obtained such giant warships? Xena was puzzled, but after seeing the blood-red skull and dagger flag at the top of the giant ship, she gasped. Scarlet tigers that are famous in the outer seas. It's actually them. Is this their base? Xena had a very strong impression of these famous pirates. Some special channels had informed her that the daughter of the dragon was actually a legendary sorcerer, and the fear she had for them rose. What shocked her more was that the Scarlet Tigers definitely had connections with the fallen family. If they're showing their flag, does that mean they're fearless now? Xena forced a laugh and sent down the order. Show our banner. We come bearing goodwill. After the signal was put up, the fleet at the other side quickly gave a response. They lined up at the two sides of the church's ships as if they were guards. They want us to maintain our speed and follow them. The sailors quickly understood the meaning of the other side's banner. Do as they wish. Xena took a deep breath and calmed the anger within her, making a logical choice. They were scared so easily. I was even going to plunder the goddess of wealth's ship. On the pirate ship that headed the rest, Ronald disdainfully pursed his lips and put down the copper binoculars in his hands. Bring them to Port Pato. All members and attendants must be checked carefully. Be vigilant. We are now the navy of the Empire. Don't get up to any tricks or I'll cut you into pieces. Understood, head. The other pirates chuckled and giggled as they answered. It was evidently difficult for them to change their attitudes. Those native sailors, however, were now much more respectful. They would be the backbone of the Imperial Navy in the future. Ronald sighed with relief, now filled with hope. Having an audience Port Pato. After handing over an application and going through a strict examination, Xena and her people were finally allowed into the port proper. They were given accommodations in what seemed to be a rushed building. Although they used wood and stone bricks, Xena could still see the shoddy work of the natives. Compared to the grass huts next to it, however, this building seemed vastly superior. A port that's under construction. Xena recalled the market she'd just seen. It couldn't even compare to the commercial street of a small town, at most the gathering of a pile of stalls. The items were only sold in clay jars, and trade was with barter without any basic currency. From her point of view, this was blasphemy towards her goddess. These darned natives, how lazy and filthy they are. A few attendants complained, but Xena did not think the same way. Although they'd only been in contact for a short time, she had seen how energetic DeBanks Island was. Goddess. Although these natives are base and weak, all their jewelry is made of gold. If this industry can be developed, grasping an opportunity to make more gold was instinctual to the priests of the goddess of wealth. I never thought this expedition would have such great harvests. However, the ocean currents in this sea region are far too dangerous. Xena frowned inside. Dinner was the natives' version of curry rice. They used banana leaves as plates, and the spice was astounding. After enjoying the sumptuous dinner, Xena summoned a high-ranked thief to her room. A golden luster filled the room. Although Xena didn't believe the natives could be all that powerful, she was still very cautious. "How is it? Have you made any discoveries?" Xena looked at the tall, slender figure in front of her that seemed to want to disappear into the shadows. "How could we get so much information in a day? Thankfully for the blessings of our goddess, the natives didn't seem to know how to keep secrets. He managed to get some intel through their legends and songs." The thief's voice was hoarse, like he was a bald eagle. "Speak," she frowned. "Firstly, this place used to be called the Sakart's Empire, but a war occurred recently. Fair-skinned godly beings came from the west and defeated them, destroying their empire. That's the direction of the mainland. There's something more surprising. There seem to be very few of those fair-skinned godly beings, numbering less than 20,000 total." The thief supplied. 20,000. Xena was caught between laughter and tears, but the Scarlet Tigers have about that number of people. An empire conquered by 20,000 people. Haha, she looked pleased as punch, thinking the Sakart's empire to just be some large native tribe. "If you knew the true might of the native empire, you definitely wouldn't be laughing now." The thief interrupted her coldly. "What's their population?" Upon hearing how serious he sounded, Xena reacted appropriately. Based on what they said, it would take 50 sunsets to walk from the beginning of the empire to the end. Each city has numerous tribes within, and the empire was also protected by the sun god who governed everything, Akhaben. The thief now looked solemn. "A conservative estimate puts the empire's population between 500,000 to 1,000,000. Their outer borders were as extensive as a kingdom's, and they were protected by a false god. To be able to defeat such a powerful empire with less than 20,000 pirates, goodness, it would be difficult to do so even if they were 500,000 pigs," Xena exclaimed, shocked. "Exactly, what I'm going to say next is key." The thief now sounded slightly emotional, trembling from fear. "Remember the holy water we were sprayed with when we first got on shore? That's just water with some sort of potion. It isn't holy water." Xena called to attention. This was rather important when it came to religion. She would never admit to being blessed by another god unless she was sure she wanted to betray Joaquin. "All right, that potion." The thief quickly realized he had misspoken and immediately corrected himself. "There seemed to be a tremendous plague at the beginning of the war. Large batches of natives died, and the winged serpent descended suddenly, possessing the abilities to heal them. They gave the natives the holy water." Winged serpent. Xena quickly thought of the goddess of wealth's divine orders, as well as how she was required to look into the giant serpent church. Yes, the holy water has astounding healing abilities and was exceptionally effective against the plague. These fair-skinned beings were seen as heroes sent down by the heavens to save them and are supported on a large scale. That's how they defeated the original Sakart's empire. Is that so? Xena looked down, clearly deep in thought. She then turned to the thief, sounding serious. "Do you think that plague has anything to do with the plague mistress?" "It shouldn't. I fought the priests of her church. While she can spread sickness, it shouldn't be so infectious. Also, her priests only know how to kill others and not save them." The thief muttered bluntly in answer. "Good then. Get more intel, especially related to the giant serpent church." Xena gave a long sigh and sent the thief away, staring at the oil lamp on the table as she muttered to herself resolutely. The Scarlet Tigers, the legendary wizard of the fallen family, and the winged serpent capable of healing sickness. What is the relationship between the three of them? At the beginning, she'd thought this was just a practical joke on Leyland's side. However, by the looks of it, it seemed impossible. "Mistress, please give me guidance." Xena gripped the holy crest in the palm of her hand and began to pray piously. A golden luster enveloped the entire room, making it look misty. "So it's the goddess of wealth. I've had the greatest amount of contact with them. Port Venus has Joaquin's church, so it's natural for them to have recorded my aura." Leyland wasn't all that surprised. After all, it was necessary for DeBanks Island to interact with the outside world. DeBanks Island had far too much work to be done, and trade would greatly help recover its vitality. It was much better for them to be discovered by Joaquin than by Helm. After all, the goddess was neutral in alignment. With the plentiful resources from DeBanks Island and the fallen empire as a whole having so many consumers, Leyland had no doubt the gold priests would be greatly attracted. However, it wasn't worth Xena risking her life. The only thing that could spur a gold bishop on was the goddess of wealth, Joaquin. No matter what she expects, DeBanks Island can definitely support itself. There's no need to fear any blockades or threats. Of course, if they can be enticed and we can get support from the trade network on the mainland, it would be great. Leyland moved his arms. Send down the order. Receive them with the most politeness possible, and send them gold and cornelian-embedded utensils. Cover the floors with fleece, and welcome her to my palace. Leyland wasn't just the ruler of a new empire. He was also its patron god, so his orders were carried out without any hesitation. Xena and her people obtained large amounts of gifts from the natives and seemed to be dazzled by their wealth. They made multiple stops along the way before reaching Fallen City, which was being rebuilt. This had been the Sakarts Empire's capital. The roads and houses were already very spacious and were now being expanded further. The vast driveways could even let a dozen horses walk side by side and speed along. The planning of this imperial city, the conqueror's ambition, is very obvious. Xena mentioned Leyland indirectly. In the natives' eyes, he was someone who represented blood and massacre, but she saw more than that. Because of the natives' minimal comprehension and the communication gap, she still had no idea who he was. Still, she was certain that he was extremely courageous, with great might and possibly more slyness than a devil. The huge disparity and powerlessness she felt caused Xena to sigh deeply. If not for the light of the goddess supporting her, she would have long since escaped from Banks Island. Information on the giant serpent church is very vague, but the priests definitely have divine spells. The person behind the giant serpent church should at the very least be a false god. Anything that had to do with gods would be a source of trouble. Xena could feel an intense headache coming on. We're here. This is our emperor's palace. Only you are allowed to enter. Elite devil hunters blocked the rest of the emissaries at the splendid golden entrance to the palace. As the bodyguards that would guard Leyland, these natives were definitely loyal. Their strength was also first-rate, and they could even be considered heroes. Their potential power was something that left even Xena's heart thumping in fear. Meeting the main doors of the Golden Court flew open, revealing an enormous hall devoid of a single soul. Spotless white fleece was laid down on the floor, as delicate as a snowflake, while bright red curtains embroidered in gold hung at the corners of the huge French windows. This was the Empire's Hall of Government. Normally, there were learned sages, treacherous bureaucrats, and those with dreams struggling here, criticizing each other. All manners of plots and massacres were born of those moments, a normal scene unable to convey any of that atmosphere. A delicate and unique fragrance hung in the air, but the incense was not thick enough to be intoxicating. Xena seemed to grow nostalgic, and she once again transformed into a naive 19-year-old young lady. Leyland had not been in possession of this place for a long time, but this palace still seemed to have some unique historical charm. It seemed like the very air had accumulated hundreds of thousands of years of the vicissitudes of life. Even a gold priest like Xena was left in a trance when shrouded in this atmosphere. Just as a gap appeared in her spirits, the sound of steady footsteps drifted into her ears. It sounded like the walls were heavily besieged as several deep cracks appeared. She saw a young man walking unhurriedly into the palace hall. He wore white robes, tailored precisely to fit his body. His even pace and bearing revealed his extraordinary confidence. Since the young man walked with his back towards the light, Xena could not see his face clearly. All she could sense was a brilliant radiance shining continuously from his body. I am Gold Priest Xena, an emissary from the mainland's Church of Wealth. I request an audience with you, Your Majesty the Almighty Conqueror. Xena had already inwardly confirmed the man's status. She bowed deeply to show her great respect. No need for pleasantries. After all, we've met several times in the past. The voice was far younger than she'd expected, and also one she could never forget. Xena raised her head, finally able to see Leyland before her. So it's you! Xena's tone revealed her confidence in her own hypothesis, as well as unconcealed shock. Although she knew him to be a legendary wizard, Xena had never expected him to conquer the entire native empire with a pirate crew. Still, that wasn't the most pressing matter. This aura. A divine being, no, a demigod. Only a demigod can put me under this much pressure. A legendary wizard who's just over 20. He's already a demigod. How could this be possible? Although she was stupefied, Xena recovered her composure fairly quickly. After all, she dealt with many churches in the past and had plentiful experience. It wasn't unheard of for ordinary people to meet with unexpected success in the world of gods, ascending into the heavens with a single leap. Sirik had only been an ordinary thief as a mortal, and now he wielded formidable divine power as the god of murder. He had the luck of obtaining a fallen god's godhood, along with their divine weapon. This had instantly made him a powerful deity himself. Compared to that, even if Leyland's progress was universally shocking, it was still acceptable. Leyland himself didn't dwell much on Sirik. The god of murder had obtained his strength by pure luck, and his powers were nothing if not for his divine boosts. As a result, he would easily suffer the control of his own powers. He was already halfway insane, so he couldn't be considered a formidable enemy. Furthermore, Leyland had grievously offended Sirik already. He had even killed a legendary of his church, and their hatred and desire for revenge was boundless. This was the main reason why Leyland had chosen the path of massacres. Although compatibility was one consideration, he wasn't afraid of slighting Sirik again. It would have been a little short-sighted to ignore him, stirring up trouble instead with a mid-ranked god like the Mistress of Plagues who he had no grudge against. Besides, a godly role in Plagues was more limited in scope and application than one in Massacre, without much room for development. A god could process all these thoughts in a split second. To Xena, it seemed like Leyland asked his next question without hesitation. "Xena, why have you come all this way?" Leyland currently had a formidable divine aura, and in her reverence, Xena almost knelt down before him. Still, she was still a gold priest of Lady Joaquin. A trickle of power surfaced from the holy crest on her chest, lending her its strength. "I am here to pass on my master's sincerity. Lady Joaquin's sincerity." Leyland looked at the bishop standing before him, a trace of playfulness flickering across his transformed golden eyes. Not so long ago, a youngster like him had needed to cautiously weigh up the disadvantages and advantages of his schemes in front of a bishop of her rank. He'd even had no choice but to let a part of his profits go in order to rope her in. Now, however, Xena could only crawl and pray for his benevolence. This gap between gods and men was so clear one could get drunk on the power. The momentary silence caused Xena to assume that Leyland was put off. She immediately continued, "I've noticed DeBank's Island has ample reserves of gold and silver. Your people luxuriously use pure gold for ornaments, and if these things were transported to the continent, just a tenth of them would win you unimaginable profits. The accumulated wealth would allow you to build 10 cities as large as Fallen." It had to be said, when Joaquin's priests saw enormous profit, their expressions changed completely. They would discard their cowardice, daring to deal with even devils and demons. Now, an inferno raged in Xena's eyes as she faced a demigod. Her pretty little cherry lips spouted devilish words of enticement. "Trade? Well, I can consider it." Leyland seemed to be considering Xena's deal on the surface, but there was a different story in his mind. Is it a trap? But Joaquin has always been strictly neutral. Is she just attracted to DeBank's Island, or maybe it's my potential? The fight against false gods was Helm's job. Leyland had never heard of the priests of the Church of Wealth actively taking such jobs. On the contrary, the priests of wealth were often dazzled by the sight of gold. There were occasional rumors of secret deals with the devils even. Although most were groundless rumors, Leyland was keen enough to notice an inkling of truth in them. Unlike demons and devils, false gods weren't considered particularly evil. Furthermore, even if DeBank's Island had enough resources to satisfy him, for now if it received the support of trade with the mainland it would recover much faster. This would also supply Leyland with a greater amount of faith. "I can accept the trade, but you need to talk concrete details with Tiff and Isabel." Leyland no longer hid his association with the giant serpent church. Or perhaps he didn't particularly care if other gods discovered that he was the serpent Kukulkan. Too many gods had been known to assume false identities, using avatars in the prime material plane. "Apart from this, my master has several very, very small requests. If your majesty can help her, my lady will absolutely be willing to provide many things that will leave you satisfied." "Oh, how interesting, do continue." Leyland stroked his chin, a smile blooming on his face. After a short while, Xena quietly left with a self-satisfied expression on her face. Leyland was left alone in the great hall. A divine glow flashed across his eyes as he watched Xena's departing back, his gaze filled with pity. Even the goddess of wealth had to comply with the oaths and unwritten rules of the gods. There were many things that she had to do despite her reluctance. Business with a false god, for example, was prohibited. This was why Joaquin hadn't shown her true self. She sent one of her priests here to serve as her shield at critical times. If Xena did not manage to see the truth, she wasn't likely to have a good future. As for Joaquin's commission itself, Leyland was rather interested. So she wants me to help her find several items, using them as an exchange? How interesting. First is the Scepter of Savras. The image of a magic staff appeared before Leyland's eyes, before quickly shattering into pieces. This divine artifact is rumored to be able to guard against prophecies and tracking by gods. That much is true, but the main part of the scepter could be in any corner of the prime material plane. It could even be down in Badr or the Abyss. Despite all that, she still covets this the most. Leyland furrowed his brows rather distrustfully. This woman, what on earth is she thinking? It was a shame that she was an intermediate god, equivalent to a rank 8 Magus of laws. Leyland could not pry apart her thoughts. One thing's for sure, be it for the trade or to hunt these items, I'll have to leave Banks Island. I need to go to the mainland or the outer plains, is that what she wants? Leyland couldn't help but guess. They weren't close in any way, so he wouldn't believe that Joaquin could so generously come over and help him so suddenly. If what I guess is true. Leyland's drooping eyelids obscured the dim light in his eyes. Scepter of Savras. After days of careful contemplation, Leyland summoned Xena and agreed to the goddess of wealth's conditions. He handed over all matters pertaining to the native empire to Isabel and Tiff, while he followed Xena's ship back to the fallen island. He was currently back at his wizard tower. Although this tower had already been upgraded several times, Leyland still found it too crude. This wasn't an issue with design, rather that he'd advanced too quickly. The basic facilities of this place couldn't keep up with his demands. Thankfully, he did not have high expectations for the environment he was to be in. With the wizard tower's isolation abilities as well as his own divine force as a cover, the preparations were complete. Chew, chew. Inside the enormous forge at the core, a golden staff floated in midair. Threads of pure gold flames were dispelled in the surroundings, forming the figure of a large, gorgeous bird. What had been the red dragon staff had undergone massive changes and improvements. The coarse and solid staff was now more slender, and the dragon claw at the top had been refined, forming the claw of a bird. The most important part, the soul within the crystal, was now replaced by the flaming bird. Beep. Red dragon staff has been resmelted. Connection and containment perfect. No conflicts in energy. The AI chip projected large amounts of information before him. Item name, Blazing Scepter. Rank, Legendary 3. Length, 0.76 m. Weight, 2900 G. Materials, Dragon Crystal, Dragon Bone, Dragon Blood, Dragon Scale, Divine Spirit, Divine Blood. Item abilities, 1 storage. The staff can contain spells, rank 9-1, rank 7-3, rank 5-5. Currently empty 2. Blazing Skyfear, legendary spell. Can be used once every 20 days. 3. Domain of Terror. 4. Blaze, absorbing the strength of divine souls, the staff can deal a one-time mental attack or boost itself. Will harm the imprisoned soul. 5. Fire immunity. Description. This staff once imprisoned a powerful legendary dragon soul, but its owner attempted a more terrifying experiment, sealing the soul of a divine being. All who use it without permission will suffer the wrath of gods. What I gave Tiff was symbolic of the church. This suits me better. When he conquered Banks Island, Leyland did indeed come into possession of the flesh and souls of other demigods. However, this staff was still his most perfect creation. Although what he'd given Tiff was a demigod weapon, it was impossible to upgrade it. This staff had a limitless future. I can upgrade this staff at any time as long as the materials I have on hand are suitable. It could even become a divine weapon. Leyland was very confident in this. Having completed the blazing scepter, Leyland did not opt to rest, instead going to another room. He closed his eyes as if in meditation, but his mind was actually communicating with the AI chip. AI chip, how goes the task I set you on? Beep. Analysis of legendary arcane spell, chain contingency at 100%, transmitting into host's mind beginning preliminary branding. The AI chip's robotic voice sounded. It had never let Leyland down before. A demigod is at the apex of the mainland. Banks Island is too remote, and it's impossible to dispatch large armies and laborers on the long journey here. If they want to deal with me, there are only a few methods. This is the one with the best chance of success. Leyland pursed his lips and lost tremendous amounts of spiritual force and arcane energy. A continuous stream of divine force made up for these losses just in time, creating a unique cycle. It took a night of this to finally set up chain contingency. While he had his own conjectures, he still chose to follow through with his plans. After all, it was foolish to offend a goddess without any evidence. Besides, he had his own plans as well, and he needed her cooperation to complete them. I hope all this is all in my head, but it's not bad to make preparations, right? Immense divine force surged out, erasing the spell's aura from Leyland's body and hiding it within the aura of the divine. It wasn't long after this was done that Gold Priest Xena visited him. Our church already has leads on the scepter of Savras. However, we need your help, my lord. Xena looked respectful as she spoke, her eyes showing that she wasn't faking any of this. Looks like this priestess thinks that her true mission is to find the scepter. Leyland sighed, and then smiled. As long as we do things according to our agreement, I'm fine with it. At the borders of the Dambreath Kingdom, west of the Werejackal Mountains, because of the suitable food and climate, there was a large number of werejackals around this place, including high-ranked sorcerers and professionals with greater intelligence than their peers. They monopolized the entire mountain, making the area dangerous. All who were not werejackals had one fate in this mountain. They would be torn to the bone and eaten. There was little the Dambreath Kingdom could do about this. They'd employed a legendary, but even he'd had to retreat. The Werejackal Mountains became a forbidden area with the passage of time. Rumor had it that there was a mysterious large door at the depths of the Werejackal Mountains, leading straight to the abyss and the Werejackal god, a sovereign who loved flesh. The closer one went to the place, the more desolate the nearby villages got. One particular path, a group of knights were hastening on their journey. Their unruffled aura alone showed that they weren't mere elites of the kingdom. They were guarding a young man and woman in the middle, each riding a handsome horse. However, considering the might of the two, it was hard to say who was being protected. The lead for the scepter of Savras is in the town up ahead. Leyland sniffed at the air, frowning slightly. Yes, my lord. This was Xena speaking. Ever since the priestess found out that Leyland had attained a realm she could never hope to reach, she had become increasingly respectful to him. She had even taken to addressing him as my lord, and if Leyland had not stopped her, she might even have called him your highness. A hunter from the village said he entered the Werejackal Mountains once by accident, and at the outer regions of the valleys saw a terrifying statue and the illusion of a scepter emitting multicolor light. That's all. Leyland's eyebrows raised. Dispatched our own legendaries after that, but even two weren't enough to break through the outer regions of the valley. However, the two of them saw the scepter as well, and it's matching the scepter of Savras by more than 90%. Xena explained, laughing wryly as she still needed Leyland's help. A boundary that even legendaries can't enter, and the scepter's there, Leyland nodded. In that case, this trip is worth it. But I've been staying at the outer seas recently. What's happening on the continent? After hearing that this was not confidential information, Xena gave him a simple rundown of the situation on the continent. Firstly, the unrest in the north had attracted the attention of the entire prime material plane. It was possible for it to escalate even further. The alliance of Mystra and Tyr was something all the orc gods feared. They first wiped out their reinforcements in Malar and a few others, then supported Illustrial's war in the north. After a few large battles, Illustrial had successfully gathered her revolutionary forces and taken over a decent amount of land. With the support of a few great noble families in the north, she had ascended the throne a few months ago and re-established the Silveramoon alliance. However, the orcs were still as powerful as before. Orc Emperor Saladin had the help of the divine weapon, the Thunder God's Hammer, and was still one of the most powerful beings in the prime material plane. If not for Illustrial blocking Saladin personally in a few battles, as well as the orc being afraid of the side effects from using the weapon, success would not have come so easily. With all that done, the Orc Empire had grown enraged. They began to gather their armies after being dealt that heavy blow. At the same time, the people of Silveramoon trained hard as well, obtaining more support from the nobles and gods of the north. It wasn't hard to imagine the even more terrifying war that would break out in the future, the greatest test for the newly reformed Silveramoon alliance. On top of that, there was the short-lived reappearance of the Western Desert's floating city. A number of legendaries had fallen there, the death of just one enough to stun the entire continent. This was something to do with a floating city. The only reason the news was this delayed was that the Western Desert was remote, with little in the means of communication. A few churches had verified the theft of the floating city by a mysterious person, and they'd posted a great bounty for the same. It had caused a great flurry in the dark world. Numerous old monsters had been startled out of their shells, pursuing the traces of the Lick Ilio. It had to be said that this was why Leyland had kept Ilio. The Lick could shoulder the brunt of the blame. Valley, the only things that alarmed the continent were the matter with the North and West Desert. The rest are just small issues. Xena stopped at this point, her beautiful eyes turning to gaze up at Leyland. But of course, if news about you were to be leaked, my lord, that would create a whole new storm. Those two things actually have something to do with me, Leyland thought as he rubbed his nose, but he had no plans of coming clean. Xena lowered her voice, speaking by Leyland's ear. The birth of a new demigod and the conquest of over 1 million natives with just 5,000 pirates. Either one of these events could stun the mainland, even affecting the outer plains. I'd rather not for now. I don't want to attract the attention of Helm's church. Leyland sternly stopped her, but this only caused a sly look in Xena's eyes. Please don't worry, my lord. Our church has worked with those like you before, and both sides have returned satisfied. I think we should discuss this in more detail tonight. Hearing Xena seemingly hint that she could help him solve the problem with the god of protection, Leyland's eyes darted around. While he was unsure if everything she said was the truth, it was always better to have more knowledge. They reached the little village Xena had spoken of without issue. Soon, however, Leyland found something strange about the place. There aren't any commoners here. They're all professionals. The radiance of a professional's soul was vastly different from that of a normal human. If the former were like a grain of sand, the latter was a firefly. Although they were both minuscule to Leyland, there was still a difference. Once we discovered this valley, our church bought the surrounding regions and stationed our knights to patrol and guard the area. Xena clapped, and 4 dark figures charged over from the village ahead. Their agility showed that they were high-ranked knights. Priestess, my lord! The 4 high-ranked knights seemed extremely humble as they led the 2's horses along like servants. The scene left Leyland speechless. He sighed after a long while, then said, as expected of the Church of Wealth, they're overbearing. Xena didn't immediately respond to this, but her eyes showed her pride. Who's defending the valley now? She asked a black-armored knight in front of her. It's the spear crusader, Lord Jeffreys. The knight unknowingly showed a look of worship. We beat down a few waves of werejackals recently. A group of adventurers from the kingdom were attracted to this place as well, but none of them were powerful. The churches of the world of gods possessed divine spells and limitless wealth. They also had large numbers of zealous followers, as well as true and eternal gods backing them. They could be called the most powerful organizations in the prime material plane. Even the human kingdoms had to yield to them, giving their people the right to worship. Given the situation, about half the powerful beings of the world were undoubtedly affiliated to churches. Unlike soldiers and adventurers, paladins had better equipment, more guidance, and overall better lives. If not for this advantage, they would consider changing gods. We'll rest here tonight and enter the mountains to meet with Lord Jeffreys tomorrow. What do you think of it? Xena now acted like the master here. Yes, that sounds good. Leyland had no objections, although a dark hint flickered in his eyes. There don't seem to be any traps, or they might be buried too deep. Night soon fell. Leyland gazed up at the starry skies and then at Xena and other knights who knew so little. His eyes showed how indifferent he felt. They're all dispensable. The gods are that heartless, huh? He muttered, his voice so low nobody heard his words. This is the valley where the strange events took place. Lord Jeffreys is waiting for you up ahead. Xena had unknowingly become a guide. She was even attempting to rope Leyland into her church, although all she did was fated to be in vain. Ah, Lord Jeffreys. Xena jogged forward, bowing towards the legendary that Leyland had met before. My apologies that you had to come all the way here to meet us. Lord Leyland, it's only been a few years since we last met, and you've already attained so much. Jeffreys didn't pay attention to Xena. To legendaries, those below their rank were ants unworthy of attention. However, Leyland was different. An intense bloodlust and threads of envy arose from Jeffreys' eyes. All legendaries desired to become gods. While Jeffreys had glory that most could not even begin to imagine, as long as he remained in Joaquin's church, he would never be able to rid himself of the shackles that bound him. Seeing Leyland having taken that important step and left him far in the dust, Jeffreys had a strange expression. What a pity. No matter how powerful you are, or how talented, you won't be able to fight off fate and the gods. Jeffreys sighed inside. steadying his faith that was on the verge of crumbling as he carried an amiable smile on his face. "You gave me a very good impression during the ceremony, Lord Jeffreys." Leyland answered easily and conversed for a while longer. They soon entered the valley shrouded with mist. "The elemental aura here is strange, and the mist seems to have a powerful sealing strength." "Be careful," Jeffreys led the way ahead. There were more and more black vines about even as the area turned more sandy, and the gray mist around them became increasingly thicker. Such great sealing strength. Even a large-scale spell formation can't be maintained for long. It would take up too much energy. It makes sense for this to be the radiation of a divine weapon, since the Scepter of Savras is rumored to have powerful sealing abilities. Werejackals, human soldiers, and adventurers seem to have been corroded by the mist. They've morphed into a different life form, so they're difficult to deal with. Just after Jeffreys spoke, the winds howled and strange sounds echoed as a werejackal darted out of the mist. The strong smell on its body caused Xena to frown. "What a joke!" Jeffreys brandished his spear, and a milky white light hacked the werejackal into two, revealing black innards and bones. "Once they're corroded, these things gain great vitality." "It'll take ages to kill them," Jeffreys explained. He then saw Leyland crouch on the ground in seeming interest, observing the flesh where the werejackal had been sliced apart. "This is the contamination in the outermost regions. It's even worse inside. If not for there being traces of a divine weapon here, I'd be prepared to tell the Druids Association and let them know of this natural pollution." Jeffreys' annoyance could be heard from his voice. "Oh, I'm sorry. It's my first time seeing beings like this." Leyland got up and apologized, and the group continued to advance amidst the mist. "We've already tested this place. Even high-ranked legendaries can't get through half of the valley." All of a sudden, Jeffreys stopped. He looked at the normal-seeming Leyland and Xena, who was straining already, a strange expression on his face. "Fight me," Jeffreys suddenly requested. "Lord Jeffreys, Lord Leyland is an esteemed guest of the church. How could you do this?" Xena exclaimed loudly before Leyland could respond. "You're attacking now. I'm curious, why didn't you bring me further in and surround me?" Leyland raised his eyebrows in doubt. "What, attacking now?" Xena took several steps back, suddenly realizing that she knew nothing. She'd been played like a puppet. "There's no fun in attacking you with others. A proud legendary should never fall just like this. I've also wanted to battle with you for a long while now." A milky white spear suddenly appeared in his hands, its sharp, barbed tip emitting a terrifying chill. "Besides, you noticed it before I even told you no." Leyland did not deny it. "I just wanted to confirm my suspicions and see how evil you are." Golden rays emanated from Leyland's body, as if giving him golden armor. The dark red massacre domain abruptly extended, causing Jeffreys to breathe roughly. "There's no need to hide anymore. Get out here." As Jeffreys' enraged roars sounded out, powerful energy undulations rumbled out before a few figures appeared around Leyland. Gray fog slowly condensed into a cage-like structure, revealing a barren area. "So it's you, Benedict. Are you done with the matters at the north?" Leyland had never expected that he'd see an acquaintance. "Leyland, you almost wrecked the plans of our master back then and turned into a sinner of the north." The Bishop of Tyr was standing right in front of him. This fellow had attacked Leyland once before. Behind him was a group of paladins, and next to them were priests and wizards that worshipped Mistra. "Attack, walking Tyr, Mistra, they're pretty much all here." "Huh." Leyland was surprised by an unfamiliar organization amongst them. Their armor was spotless with red capes attached. On the breastplates and capes were the symbol of a large golden eye, seemingly never closing. The armor was threaded with gold and had gems embedded in it, making it look dazzling. Armor with the eternal light spell as well as that symbol. "Are you priests of Helm?" Divine force flashed, the powerful massacre domain causing everyone's expressions to change. "False god!" One of Helm's priests spat out, and layers of light emanated from the eye at his chest. It was clearly on equal ground with Leyland, perhaps even overpowering him. Helm was the god of protection, and his church was built to crack down on faith in false gods. Naturally, they had experience in dealing with divine beings and even demigods. "Our mission is to crack down on the belief in false gods, purifying the origin of the world." The priest looked pious as he prayed with the rest of Helm's warriors and priests. They each took a step forward, their eyes full of fervor as if they were heading to church. Rumble. A surge of power whistled out and a golden eye appeared in the air. It locked onto Leyland, showing an inverted reflection of him. Beep. Host has been marked by the god of protection. Divine force locked, domains weakened by 20%. Host's location will be relayed every 3 hours. Remove. The AI chip's voice sounded, and Leyland turned grim. As expected of a church that deals with false gods, they've made ample preparations. Leyland was still smiling confidently, and he ordered in his mind, "Prepare to remove, but wait for my order. Remain in observation mode." Leyland was not surprised that Helm's church had surrounded him. After all, the God of Protection's mission was to deal with false gods. As long as news about Leyland was revealed, the zealous priests would come join in on the fun, bringing their own rations along with them. Still, I never thought I was being lured into so many enemies. It looks like the gods are afraid of me. Or were they alarmed by some divination? "You'll have to explain this later, Jeffries," a priestess of Mistra said as she walked out. She had silver hair, and her eyes glinted gold. She was looking at Leyland like he was a dead man. Jeffries answered with a cold snort. All legendaries had their own pride, so how could he bow down to someone else? On top of that, Jeffries served walking, and he had nothing to do with Mistra. "I stand by my request. If you win over me, I shall leave immediately." Jeffries pointed his spear at Leyland, causing the priestess to turn red in her fury. "Forgive me, but before that, can I ask who planned this out?" Leyland interrupted. "It is the will of our god," the priestess admitted. She looked flushed. This slightly exceeded his expectations. He wouldn't have found it surprising if Helm's church had been the ones to identify him, planning an attack. The same when if Walking was coveting his lands and wealth, or even Benedict, who just hated evil. However, none of this had anything to do with the goddess of the weave. From how it seemed, she was the person who feared him most. Are the prophetic abilities of the gods that great? Leyland immediately recalled his rank 12 arcane spell, Karsus, Avatar. He himself wasn't even as strong as a lesser god, and was unable to deal much damage to them. This spell, though, defied logic. One use of it would give him control of the weave's power, causing Mistra to fall. On top of that, the destruction of the weave would release the conscience of the numerous ancient magi from the core, causing the ancient final war to once again rock the world of gods. Is she afraid of what I can do if I develop further? I could become a huge threat to her, so she's making the first move. It was impossible for Mistra to know the existence of Karsus' avatar. The only possible explanation was that she had a premonition that Leyland would bring great danger to her. When an ant threatened them, most people would just end it with a stomp. This was obviously Mistra's own course of action, but since much of her strength was stuck in the north, she'd roped in quite a few other helpers. In such a situation, it was likely that Leyland would fall. Things would have been troublesome had I not made preparations. Leyland ran through his thoughts and came up with numerous possibilities. If I'm at my wit's end, I'll definitely risk using Karsus' avatar. That'll give me a chance of survival. But that means Distorted Shadow could also have something to do with this. Leyland had a strong feeling that Distorted Shadow had leaked his location, as well as the degree of threat he posed. After all, he was an ancient peak rank 8 Magus, equivalent to a greater god. How could the conscient in the ruins be the only thing he left behind? It required no effort to use the power of distortion to show the truth to the goddess, or even just give her some clues. If the process itself was much too complicated, then one could find the truth by looking at who would benefit by the result. Thinking everything over, Leyland believed that the most likely case was that Distorted Shadow had played his hand from behind the scenes. If it's him, I won't be able to use the ghost city as I wish, so I have to abandon Plan 3. So, who's going to be first? The pure gold blazing scepter emerged, and powerful spell energy surged out. It caused everyone's expression to change. Our church has arranged a spell formation specifically to subdue false gods. He can't use the power of his domain completely. The channel of faith from his worshippers has also weakened greatly, and our Lord has marked him AH. The priest of Helm soon cried out in pain, covering his eyes. Leyland had commanded the AI chip to remove the mark, and it caused the golden eye in the sky to fall apart. It seemed to have affected these priests. "Ha, good. This is the kind of opponent that I want." Jeffries burst into laughter. He'd let go of everything in his mind at that moment, only focusing on his opponent. He let loose a sudden attack, and faint black lines appeared around the holy spear as it crushed the space around it. Benedict seemed to be operating some spell formation as well. Large beasts the size of hills crawled out of the mist, and the legendary wizard nearby seemed to be preparing some legendary spell. "This is what I've prepared for you." Benedict now had an unnatural flush on his face. A few of the giant beasts roared as he waved a hand, the thorns on their backs emitting a chilling glint as they attacked Leyland. "I'll let them play with you first." 4 churches had joined hands here. Even a small attack could cause the entire prime material plane to gape. Still, Leyland's expression did not change in the face of this attack that could almost kill gods. Chew, chew. He tossed the scepter out and the flaming bird totem appeared, bashing into the giant beasts. Sacred spear. Is that considered amazing? Leyland stared at the spear that seemed to be moving in an instant, as if dealing with it was beneath himself. 2 spells were cast simultaneously with a wave of his arm, striking the tip of the spear and the black cracks surrounding it. Greater disjunction. Shattering palm. Jeffrey's spear crumbled instantly against the disjunction spell, and the gigantic golden palm sent him flying. His chest caved in, and blood spurted out of his mouth. He can instantly cast legendary spells. The legendary wizard that had come with Mistra's church noted the spells Leyland had cast, and then at the large number of materials in his hands with the spell he was halfway through preparing. His expression grew extremely dark. "I don't care anymore." As a wizard himself, he understood how powerful Leyland had to be to cast legendary spells instantly. After weighing the pros and cons, he immediately made his choice. A teleportation gate opened, and the legendary wizard immediately took his apprentices and hid away. He showed Leyland a few signs, a declaration of peace amongst wizards. "You!" Mistra's priests saw the legendary wizard leave and suddenly twitched, on the verge of coughing up blood. Although they'd known wizards lacked faith, they hadn't expected it to be this bad. Truth be told, there was little they could do about him. At the very least, he'd come all the way here. With his connections, attacking the legendary wizard would cause chaos within the church. Damn it! If the goddess Avatar were here, nobody would dare do that. The female priest gritted her teeth, but there was nothing she could do. Teleportation Leyland was growing more vicious in his attacks, seemingly blinded by the killing. He was going to beat them at their own game, and after looking at which opponents were going to attack, he would show his strength and intimidate the rest. He was basically exhibiting his full power here. That was the full power of a demigod. The support of an endless stream of faith and emotion, combined with his experience as a near-rank 7 Magus, giving Leyland a battle might he himself was surprised by. He tore 2 of the giant mist creatures apart with his bare hands, and suddenly jumped. Once he touched the ground, he'd caught up to Jeffries, who was quickly retreating. Having been hit with the greater disjunction, Jeffries' spear had been destroyed, as well as a silver necklace on his neck. That was followed by his robes, his boots. As a legendary, you still have some dignity. Leyland's evaluation was apathetic, though the movements of his hands never showed. A colorful mage sword formed in his grasp. This sword, molded by his spiritual force, was now comparable even to divine weapons. "Save our ally!" A few priests wearing the uniform of Helm's church were startled, and quickly cast a holy shield for Jeffries. "Don't bother me," Leyland frowned slightly, and the mage sword created a few beautiful cross-shaped slashes in the air. Swish! 2 of the priests were hit by the slashes, and the many defensive spells on their bodies were ripped apart. Afterwards, their bodies were cut open. It was still a slight breather, though, and Jeffries continued to retreat. "While I do admire you, it's impossible for you to change your faith." Leyland quickly chased up to him with a look of pity in his eyes. The mage sword in his hands pierced forward, breaking his last layer of defense. Hee. I didn't think you'd be so powerful. Cough, cough. What a shame. I will never be able to see the gorgeous summer warbler flower of the northern seas ever again." Jeffries was now heavily injured, and no longer had the ability to retreat. Hearing Leyland's words, he slowly closed his eyes to await death. "Please pardon Jeffries, Leyland fallen." A slender palm grabbed Jeffries' collar and teleported out of the battlefield in an instant. "Xena!" "No, my lady." Jeffries gazed at Xena. The gold priest had originally been scared stiff, so weak she was cowering in a corner. She'd been lucky enough not to get involved in the battle, but she looked frozen and pale. Now, although she maintained that appearance, every action of hers was filled with absolute dignity and confidence. She wasn't even a legendary. Xena could not have such a divine luster on her body, nor could she rescue Jeffries. The only explanation was that she'd been possessed by a powerful existence. The only being that a priest would give their mind and body up for was naturally the god they worshipped. "Nice to meet you, Lady Joaquin." Leyland bowed elegantly, and then easily decapitated 2 more priests of Helm's church. Such savagery and poise were very conflicting. "I apologize. You were a child that I thought well of, but I already had a deal with Mistra, and I need to play by the book. Joaquin pulled at Jeffries as she moved backwards, speaking calmly and with grace. It was only a singular deal, though. I can assure you that your territory will not be affected, but only if you survive this and grant them the glory of a true god. By the time the last word was spoken, Joaquin had already brought Jeffries away from the valley. A dazzling golden arc quickly left Xena's body, forming the image of an elegant woman wearing gold robes. Only half her body was shown. As the one who'd been a container for her goddess, Xena had been abandoned. She paled again and fell into a coma, obviously not in a good state. It was likely that this incident would reduce her lifespan. Divine ability, space-time shift. Joaquin's figure pointed towards Leyland while in midair and then exploded, disappearing into nothingness. Leyland, on the other hand, felt like everything was spinning. By the time he regained his senses, he was almost out of the valley and at an area he had been in before. Tens of giant mist beasts were eyeing him like he was prey. An intermediate god has such mysterious abilities. The corner of Leyland's lips quirked up in a smile. Was what she said at the end out of goodwill or a threat? At the very least, I can be sure that she plotted against me because of the deal. After this, they don't owe each other anything anymore. There are only 3 true enemies then. Although the people from the Church of Wealth had left, the powerful beings who had fallen apart due to Leyland's sudden outburst had time to regroup. "Ha ha! You're fated to fall here." Veins visibly bulged in Benedict's eyes, like he was a crazy gambler who'd been at it for 3 full days. "Oh. You're so confident that you can take me down." Making quick work of the paladins and giant mist beasts, Leyland shot a glance at Benedict, who looked like he had a card up his sleeve. Demigods are practically the peak of the prime material plane. Unless the true bodies of the gods descend as saints, nobody can match up to them void of a group of high-ranked legendaries unfearing of death. Another option is for several avatars to mount a sneak attack, but he probably won't be willing to pay such a huge price. There's only one method left. Even greater gods had to abide the rules of the world of gods. Avatars weren't all that powerful in the prime material plane, and the only thing that would make a difference was their numbers. However, it was too much of a waste for a few avatars or high-ranked legendaries to fall for the sake of killing Leyland. Unless there was such enmity between them that it could only be resolved by death, it was unlikely for them to go that far. "It's done!" Benedict's gleeful voice sounded at that moment, and the mist in the surroundings quickly dissipated to reveal a huge, four-sided magic formation. BZZT, BZZT. One gray pillar of light rose into the sky after the other, forming a terrifying cage that sealed Leyland within. Benedict used a crystal core to control it. This undulation. Looks like it really is. Leyland's eyes flashed, and he pointed straight at Benedict. "Order of law, death." "Get away," the surrounding priests quickly yelled. Had he let go of the crystal at this moment, Benedict would definitely have had a chance of survival. However, he did nothing. He seemed ready to die as he continued to transmit energy from his body to the core. Bang! His corpse crumpled to the ground, and the gray pillars shrunk, turning into a seal-income teleportation spell formation. With a flash of light, Leyland's figure disappeared from within. "Benedict!" A few paladins gathered, gazing at Benedict, who breathed no more. There was a slight satisfied smile on the corner of his lips. "You shall obtain light. May your soul rest in the divine kingdom." After a few sorrowful words, the rest of the survivors gathered and began to pray for Benedict. "We may fall for eternity, collapsing on our paths as we root out evil. However, justice shall always follow." A paladin who had broken his arm from the scuffle with Leyland sighed as he spoke. Such thinking immediately garnered the approval of Helm's church, while Mistra's priests all went quiet. However, the silver-haired priestess suddenly exclaimed, "No! What happened?" This sudden action immediately gave rise to glares from the paladins. The priestess continued without hesitation. "There are no traces of him in our master's divine kingdom. The false god was not teleported there." Due to the powerful suppression of the prime material plane, the gap between avatars and demigods was minimal, and they were almost on equal grounds. Things were different in the outer planes, though. Although a lesser god's avatar wasn't much different from a greater god's here, the gap between them there was like that between the heavens and the earth. This was even more evident in divine kingdoms. No matter which divine kingdom Leyland entered, his only fate would be death as he met the true bodies of the gods in their own nests. This had been their plan all along. Since she was a greater god, as well as the person who planned this, the teleportation formation that had been set up led to Mystra's divine kingdom. That was why it was so difficult to activate. However, while the spell formation had worked successfully, it had not achieved the expected results. The group turned grim, looking at their companions, Bodies and Benedict's smile in death. It had become the greatest irony in the world. Two gods stood shoulder to shoulder in the vast spatial cracks. Be it spatial turbulence or the expulsion of the four elements, everything before them was automatically dispersed, forming a safe zone. This strength indicated that they were at the very least avatars of greater gods. Leyland was also extremely familiar with the two of them. Amongst them was someone who looked like an old veteran with his right hand and eye missing. The other was a young girl who looked like a wizard, the power of the weave surging within her body. This was Mystra and Tyr, the goddess of the weave and the god of justice. It took a long while for Mystra to open her eyes and speak. The teleportation was disturbed. He did not reach my divine kingdom. I checked the area here, including the dimensional cracks. There's no sign of the floating city, Tyr replied. Hell, the information should be incorrect. Leyland might not have obtained the flying city Thultanthar. Either that, or he's extremely crafty and predicted our ambush. Mystra's beautiful gaze pierced through the void, seeing the scenario unfolding in the world. Had Leyland been here, he definitely would have broken out into cold sweat. Had he actually used the floating city to attack the backbone of these churches, the gods lying in wait for him would definitely show him why the flowers were dyed red. This was two greater gods. Leyland had a chance to resist them in the prime material plane, but outside it there were no more restrictions. There would be no chance for him to fight back. Where did you obtain this information? Tyr asked, rousing from his silence. One of my worshippers met a devil during his travels and obtained the information from him. However, the devil was already dead by the time I got there, and his soul had disappeared as well. A trace of doubt surfaced on Mystra's face. I feel an extremely irksome and sinister aura, more vile than the three monarchs of the deep abyss. This is a mysterious existence, more sinister than evil itself. Tyr shuddered, as if having recalled some unwanted memory. You should go and check the seals, remove any contamination around the area if needed. You mean? Mystra inhaled deeply, spitting out the taboo word of times long past. Magi. Teleportation light flashed as Leyland stepped out of a distortion in space. A mere moment before, the AI chip's voice had sounded out. Contingent conditions met. Instant teleportation activated. Instant teleportation was indeed the safest option. I fear nobody in the main world, but I can't be too sure in the outer planes. Right now, I'm most likely in. Leyland looked around. Meteors streaked past the crimson sky, dancing in the air. His surroundings were a charred mess, the desolate earth littered with small rocks. A few hills in the distance broke the even landscape. Who? This seems to be. The air was filled with a tinge of malevolence and dread, cluing Leyland into his whereabouts. Of course, the little streams of blood flowing around the land left no more room for doubt. Bodder the nine hells, I knew this felt familiar. Leyland stretched his back lazily before sending out a command. AI chip conduct scan. Beep. Mission established, beginning scan. The AI chip's voice intoned. It was followed up instantly. Environment scanned, air analysis complete. Current location, Avernus, the first level of Bodder. Beep. Laws in the area are different from the prime material plane, analyzing. It quickly showed the properties of the world. 1. Gravity normal. 2. Time flow normal. 3. Space unlimited. The 9 levels of hell extend indefinitely, but are always a fixed distance from the abyss and their lower levels. 4. Divine form. An organism requires the strength of at least a lesser god to transform the 9 hells, and this transformative control extends over the regular organisms of the region. 5. No elemental affinity. All elements are balanced in power. 6. Minor lawful evil. Any beings of the chaotic or good alignment are weakened, and devils will attack them. Beings of the lawful evil alignment receive a slight buff to powers. This is indeed the territory of the devils. Leyland inhaled deeply. He felt like he'd merged into one with the entirety of Bodder, an impression he'd been given because he'd devoured Beelzebub before. But the impression wasn't necessarily false. His own disposition was quite aligned with the laws of hell, which meant this place could bear the weight of his ambitions. He would soar into the skies. Demigods can traverse planes. I can return to the prime material plane if I want to, but since I'm already here. Leyland stroked his chin. Anyway, DeBank's Island is quite far from the mainland and won't be influenced easily. I can manage my worshippers and their divine spells just as easily from this place. I've wanted to make a trip to Badr anyway, so I might as well get on with it. Badr had 9 levels, called the 9 Hells. It was an ideal destination for travelers, a place where treasure hunters could satisfy their greed and paladins would seethe with rage. As a dimension, it was the ultimate embodiment of lawful evil, laced with the cold, harsh cruelty of schemes and ploys. It was the garden of various devils, including bearded devils, horned devils, ice devils, barbed devils, pit fiends, and countless others. They had a hierarchy here, and apart from the devils were also hellcats, hellhounds, imps, chitons, dream-eaters, demonic beasts, and even humans. The devils of the 9 Hells abided by a hierarchical system, with status obtained through schemes and ruthless action. The 9 Hells of Badr, the endless abyss, and the everlasting Underdark, the underground planes of the world of gods. All wizards were erudite. On top of that, Leyland had Beelzebub's memories and researched this land before, so his knowledge of and familiarity with the 9 Hells exceeded even that of those in the celestial planes. Badr has a total of 9 levels, a place for fallen souls. Legends say that it was once part of the abyss, from which it later separated itself. The ruler in name is Asmodeus. Information on Badr surfaced in Leyland's mind. Although Asmodeus was hailed the supreme of the 9 Hells, he only had control over the 9th Hell, Nessus, a plain filled with canyons deeper than any marine trench. His control over the other 8 Hells was limited. Rumors said that Asmodeus had ascended to his throne through countless battles. He'd schemed his way along, putting together an epic army consisting of pit fiends and greater devils, securing his seat as the leader of the 9 Hells with the assistance of the overlords of each level. According to Leyland's own understanding, Asmodeus did not have much control over the other Hells. The overlords of each level were about the same ranking as him. Of course, Asmodeus himself wouldn't admit to this matter, making efforts to stand out amongst the rest. As the most powerful of archdevils, Asmodeus had unparalleled strength. He was not inferior to any of the greater gods. He'd expanded his influence over Badr in the past several thousand years, showing his wild ambition to unite it all. When Beelzebub had gone missing from the 2nd level, he'd grasped the chance to strengthen his control of it. Of course, the 6 remaining archdevils did not agree. Jealous of Asmodeus, they'd employed a series of ploys until the 9 Hells had reached a miraculous balance. That was, of course, until Leyland flew in like a butterfly. No, he was a Tyrannosaurus Rex that would disrupt the scales. The forces here now had a new variable to consider. There are 8 archdevils in Badr, with the 1st level being in a common area that is the front line of bloody battles. There's even some gods who have housed their divine kingdoms here, like the kobold god Kurtlemak and the shark god Sekala. On top of that, due to the battles with the demons, Asmodeus has a great amount of influence here. The Dark 8, his 8 generals, are stationed in this place. As for the 2nd level it's a place I'm extremely familiar with. It was Beelzebub's fief, and right now he's probably hiding somewhere inside, deep in slumber. With most of his divinity and divine force devoured, Beelzebub had sustained serious injuries. He was recovering even if slowly, with chances of a complete recovery. After all, he was the archdevil of this level, someone loved by the will of Badr. The fortunes he'd amassed would be enough to tide him through this crisis. However, Leyland aimed to complete devouring Beelzebub, taking everything in his position. The 3rd level of hell is Minoros, a filthy marsh ruled by Mammon, the Lord of Greed. Legends say that if one is tainted by the greed and corruption there, they will sink deep into the marsh and eventually get swallowed by it. The rest of their levels have their owners as well, with Asmodeus in the 9th. Leyland counted on his fingers. 8 archdevils, plus a few gods and the pit fiends on the 1st hell. They're the strongest in all of Badr. These people were exceptionally powerful, and they also had their own forces behind them. Someone able to grow their influence in hell itself was no easy character, capable of many ploys and conspiracies. However, the more this was true, the more burning desire Leyland felt. I really want to kill them all. Leyland had never shied away from powerful enemies and unimaginable difficulty. On the contrary, such things only ignited his fighting spirit and his confidence. He would amass his strength steadily and finally defeat them in one fell swoop. Night Hag 1st Hell of Badr, Avernus. A nightmare trod across the barren land that was littered with shattered rocks. Its blazing hooves left a deep imprint wherever it stepped. Boom! A meteorite crashed into the ground, leaving a large pit. However, the horse nimbly avoided it. This nightmare had a human on its back, the very act of taming a beast such as it indicating that this was no average person. That simple line of reasoning had saved Leyland from many problems. The roads in this area were filled with regular souls, and even petitioners. It told Leyland that his destination was near. Lawful evil humans from the prime material plane, if they prayed to devils, had a very high chance of entering Badr after they died. Their souls would morph, making them petitioners or even lesser devils. Some devils liked contorting these souls into grotesque forms, expressing a form of aesthetic view like they were ornaments. These creatures had rather appalled Leyland at first, but after seeing a few of them he came to ignore it. He stopped the nightmare in front of a soul. This one had pale skin with twisted eyes and a nose. It seemed to be suffering but still looked at Leyland with vigor. This was the reverence it had when looking at a powerful devil. "What's your name? Do you remember your past?" Leyland noticed that this soul was rather plump, and the originally lavish robes indicated that he'd led a rather good life back in the prime material plane. "Lucas, or something else, who knows? Pormy has to arrive at the Bronze Citadel in 3 blood days, or my owner will not forgive me." The soul lamented. "I was just a small merchant from the north in my previous life. I even prayed piously to the goddess of wealth." Leyland rolled his eyes inwardly. It was extremely common for merchants to turn to walking. Even normal worshippers, as long as they didn't commit heinous crimes in their pasts, would likely be redeemed and sent to her divine kingdom. As for Lucas, he was either lying or pretending to be a worshipper, hence his current predicament. This very exchange showed that these souls had learnt the trademark of the devils, of pretense and deceit. "Bronze Citadel, that's my destination as well." Beelzebub's memories said the Bronze Citadel was the core of Avernus. It was constructed boorishly, built to be an inflexible structure. The many devils in it were always prepared for war, and since they were often under siege it was expanded and repaired constantly. "All right then, esteemed lord, do you need a map or a guide? With the magnanimity of someone at your level, you won't refuse a reward, will you?" The eyes of the soul spun quickly. Even with a contorted face, its intelligence and greed were apparent. "Or perhaps a small trade." Lucas's thumb and index finger grinded against each other, giving off a very wretched look. "As expected, you really are suited to hell. Filled with greed as you are, why didn't you enter Minoros immediately upon death?" A pillar of evil light rose up from Leyland's body, and the surroundings were dyed crimson. Everything came to a standstill, and even the meteors crashing down from the sky were stopped in midair. This was a devil aura. It was one of Beelzebub's powers that had been devoured by Leyland, finally revitalized and emerging from a corner of his soul. The AI chip provided data on the ability. Devil aura, passive domain. Restricted to powerful devils, it allows the user to naturally impose fear upon others. Any lesser devils in the vicinity are put under control, confusion, and fear. Note, the aura attracts the hostility of other powerful devils. If the controlled devil already has an owner, a negotiation will be held. "This light that belongs only to pure evil. Are you a pit fiend?" Luca's body collapsed helplessly to the ground, his eyes radiating fear. "Master, Luca's master." As expected, devil aura works differently in hell. It can't vanquish the devil in sight immediately. Leyland shook his head. As Lucas wailed for help, a contractual force arose from his body. It finally formed the figure of a night hag wearing a pointed hat. "Gae, ancient and powerful devil, has my slave offended you?" The night hag's voice sounded coarser than an owl's chirps, making one shudder in fear. These night hags often appeared in Badr and the Abyss during transaction, acting as merchants. Collecting souls was their favorite pastime. Although what had appeared was just a phantom, it still showed strength greater than that of a rank 15 wizard. The night hag could not see through Leyland at all. Although he seemed to just be an evil human, the devil aura and his alignment could not be faked. Thus, she assumed that he was a powerful devil who'd assumed human form. Leyland's divine force masked his identity anyway, and coupled with his own evil alignment, even an archdevil wouldn't be able to unmask him. Indeed. He seems to be a little out of it with his intelligence corrupted by greed. He actually wanted to strike a deal with me. Leyland shook his head. Couldn't even understand the underlying traits of a trade. No wonder he's just a normal soul, unable to even turn into a lesser devil. "Gae, I do hope to be someone worthy of a trade with your distinguished self. As the price for offending you, I can sell him to you for a contract, the price being 1 regular soul." The night hag looked at Leyland, but was regrettably declined. "How foolish do you think I am, to trade for this fellow using a soul?" He pointed nonchalantly at Lucas, who was shuddering in fear. "It's obvious that you cheated him, or used some kind of underhanded means to nullify the original contract with his owner. What a pity." The night hag did not show the slightest form of repentance. Just like Leyland said, the soul was something she'd picked up along the way, not worth much. "You can deal with Lucas any way you like, just remember to repay me later." The phantom flickered and was about to vanish. "Wait," Leyland said just then, holding the night hag back. "I'm not very interested in this soul, but there is something you own that I'd very much like." Leyland continued. "I'm a traveler from Dis. Much of the information regarding Avernus is now out of date, so I need the freshest information about this place. I also need information about the Blood War and detailed maps. You'll be very satisfied with my price." "Gee, I do like generous customers." The night hag cackled like an owl. "Ever since your lord disappeared, a lot of devils from Dis have been coming here." The night hag handed the information over to Leyland, even adding some details regarding Dis as if by accident. To be privy to such information, the being had to be both strong and been a resident for a long time. However, Leyland had Beelzebub's own memories. He knew the lands like the back of his palm, so the deceit and trickery planted within didn't affect him at all. He. "Okay then, powerful traveler from Dis. I need 3 regular souls or something similar in exchange." A green parchment floated beside the night hag. A phosphoric glow surrounded it, giving it a mysterious vibe. "A spatial spell. Botter seems to have some good stuff." Leyland's eyes flashed, and 3 slumbering souls appeared beside him. "This." The night hag gave off a fervent gaze, as if seeing good liquor. She stepped forward immediately and continued to give her approval. "Gee, very powerful souls indeed. It's a pity that they're branded by gods. That's a huge problem. I want at least 5 of them to make up for the defect." "Are you kidding me?" Leyland said indifferently, and his devil aura grew even more intense as it pushed the night hag away. "The souls of pious worshippers are pure and powerful. Furthermore, the gods that they pray to are now dead, so there won't be any consequences. These souls are worth at least 2 to 3 times a regular one, and I'm already offering you 3. Your greed knows no bounds. Mammon would likely be a better lord for you to serve." The night hag wasn't embarrassed at all once exposed. It was the most basic nature of a devil to haggle. She agreed to the trade in the end, but Leyland refused to sign any form of contract with her. Devils were experts at deceiving people through contracts, and Leyland was not in the mood to engage in wordplay with a night hag. "Gee, we shall meet again, generous guest." The night hag vanished into thin air, along with Lucas. Having borne the cost of the teleportation, he was sucked dry and had his body crushed by the void.